Welcome to the FAST Podcast, Financial Advisor Strategy Talks with Laura Galloway, SVP of Financial Education at White Glove. Laura provides advisors with an opportunity to hear from some of the best minds in the business. Follow along to learn quick tips to help you grow your business, from gaining new leads to keeping current clients engaged, and everything in between. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the FAST Podcast with your host, Laura Galloway from White Glove. Laura, what is going on with you?
Hey, Eric, ready for another great podcast with you today?
Yeah, absolutely. I love sitting in on these conversations. And when I say sitting in, it's really I'm sitting in. You have a guest on the show today. So for those that don't know, White Glove has a YouTube channel, and some of these are on there. So you may be able to go and see them. But I see your guest. Who'd you bring on the show today?
Well, with me today is a great friend of White Glove's, actually a good friend of mine. I really count you as a friend, Frank. So happy to know you over these years. We have the wonderful Frank Maselli. Let me tell you a little bit about Frank. He is a former U.S. Army officer and 38-year veteran of the financial services industry. He's one of the nation's premier keynote speakers and coaches, and he's also one of White Glove's premier coaches. We send all of our hosts to him to get extra presentation training and speaking training. And he's the author of 3 best-selling books that help advisors, wholesalers, and managers in advanced communication and business development skills. So welcome to the FAST Podcast, Frank.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, we had the wonderful pleasure of having you here in our offices for some training the last couple of days. It was great to see you in person. And even though we're back here on Zoom, I love that this makes it possible for us to get your training and mentoring out to so many people in the, little snippets of educational podcasts that we're trying to put out here. So I am so excited because today I brought you on to talk about one of the many tools you have created for advisors. We use a lot of your tools here, Frank. We have your books here. All of our hosts get to read it. Our sales team is trained on them. You've done so much, and you keep creating new great content, including one we're going to talk about today, which is the Harbor Pilot Paradigm. But Frank, before we get into that, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about your background in the work you do with us at White Glove and the work you do with all the advisors you've been working with for the last 30 plus years. Why did you come up with a tool like this? What is the purpose of it?
The tools I've come up with, including the Harbor Pilot, all have one simple purpose, which is to help advisors succeed in helping more clients. As you know from all my training programs, I don't believe we're a sales profession anymore. I believe we're the greatest helper profession on the planet. And I've been devoting my entire career to helping advisors just be better at what they do. And this particular tool, it really hit me out of the blue one day. And I said, oh my God, this is a great idea. And as I began to flesh it out and think more deeply about it, it just took on a life of its own. And I think it really will help people differentiate themselves in the minds of clients who really kind of don't know what the differences are between advisors. From a client perspective, the average investor thinks we're all the same. I mean, they literally don't know the differences. And there are some very big differences and very important ones that I think make a lot of sense for clients to understand. It's just a great tool to help them do it. So,
well, you are a classic and quintessential educator because you do take really complex ideas and make them simple enough for anybody to be able to explain it and understand it. And I think that's part of the key, is getting these advisors to learn how to actually explain what they do and how they're different. And that's so beneficial. Okay, Harbor Pilot.
Sure.
Frank, why do advisors need to talk about big boats and docks and how to get to them? Help me out.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, it's such a rich analogy. For many, many years, advisors have been using another analogy, the mountain climbing analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about going up the mountain in the accumulation phase, and then coming down the mountain in the decumulation phase, where people are retired and now they've got to live on the money. And so I said, the mountain thing is good. It's not bad. It's not a bad analogy at all, but I just can't picture myself climbing a mountain. And I have no resonance with that particular imagery or that metaphor or that model. And so I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And without getting into too long-winded a story, I remembered something that my wife and I experienced many, many years ago. We have a house at Lake George. We had a boat, and we went out and bought this beautiful boat. It was a lot of fun. We're sailing the boat, we're motoring the boat on the lake. Came time to dock the boat, and it was a catastrophe of enormous proportions. We had no idea how to dock a boat. We really had no clue. And we bumped into other boats, and we banged into the dock, and we did some insane stuff that caused all the other boat owners to come running down to try to save us. It was hysterical.
You guys got lots of dinner invites right off the bat from all your friends there,
People
right?
They wanted us to stop hitting their boats is what they want. It was just so funny in hindsight. And it struck me, I said, docking a boat is a very difficult thing to do. And that was only a 26-foot boat. And then I thought more deeply about it. And I said, what about a 1,500-foot cargo ship? And to truncate this story, every harbor in the world is very complicated. The harbor is a complicated place. Okay. And by maritime law, you are required, if you have a ship, you are required to bring aboard a harbor pilot to get your ship into that dock. Okay. And I grew up in New York City. In New York City, within 20 miles of New York, you must have a harbor pilot on board your boat if the boat's over like 100 feet long. So I said, oh, why is that? That's interesting. Well, the reason for that is the risks in the harbor are 100 times greater than the risks on the open ocean. I mean, on the open ocean, okay, there's storms, there's an occasional, rogue wave. There might be an iceberg if you're up north, but on balance, it's a pretty calm thing. And the analogy, the connection there is that during the accumulation phase, there's very little that can go wrong. Now, yes, there are market downturns, there's bear markets, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. But if you've got 30 years to invest your money, and time is your greatest ally as an investor during the accumulation phase, you lose that ally when you get close to the harbor. There's no more time left. You're in retirement now. You can't make those mistakes anymore. You can't recover from a bad decision. Anyway, to keep this tight, the analogy is pretty darn near perfect. And I help advisors understand that they are the harbor pilot. When that client who's accumulated this giant mass of assets over their lifetime, whatever the size is immaterial, but it's an important amount of money. When that client gets close to retirement, they need a specialist. They need an expert to come aboard the boat and to say, let me get you into the harbor safely. That's what the harbor pilot's all about. And the analogy is extremely deep, and there's lots of details and nuances to this that you can go crazy with, but it's very powerful. It's a very powerful metaphor.
Well, I love what you've just illustrated there, Frank, because not only are you explaining this analogy, like this paradigm, here's this tool you can use the harbor pilot paradigm to explain to your clients what you do, how you do, why it's so necessary, how you're different. But you also jump straight into storytelling, which you do so beautifully. And you had me right at that hook. I'm like thinking about you and your wife, and I've got this visual going. And I just want to say that that's one of the things that I have worked with you for years. And I know that you teach a lot of our clients is what you did immediately with the storytelling like that is you already got me hooked and started building that rapport with me because I'm really listening and relating to you as a human. And I know that that's one of the things that you teach. I mean, we're kind of going deep here, but that's one of the things that you've always taught some of the clients that you've coached for us is that your whole job, right? You said it's not a sales job. We're helpers. But people have to know that we can help. They have to know how we can help. They have to trust that we can help them. And by building some of that trust up with that rapport right off the bat, telling a little story, you're telling a story about a ship. And again, I love what you said about in comparison to the mountain climber, you can't really resonate with that. You don't climb mountains. That just doesn't really go for you. And, maybe it's a really good analogy for some people who can use it, but for folks that doesn't work. Have you been on a cruise? Have you seen a yacht? Have you looked at a big boat? Have you watched somebody try to? Yeah, you can think about that and relate to it. And so, Frank, I just kind of want to take it from there and say, one of the things that I appreciate you do is you tell people, look, not everybody can do this shtick. Not everybody's got my style. Not everybody's going to say things the way I say it. How can you help an advisor take this kind of a paradigm and make it their own?
Great question. First of all, the tool itself, I think, will help tremendously. It's a really nice PDF. They can read it. They can absorb it. It's very easy to understand. I've also created a complete PowerPoint on this that they can bolt onto the back of any presentation they do. It's completely compliance neutral. There's no product in there at all. So, we've made this very comfortable for an advisor to say, yeah, I like this analogy. I'm gonna incorporate it, and they don't have to think too much about it. I mean, it's all written up for them in excruciating detail. So we've fleshed out the tool quite vividly, and then there's some scripting, there's some audio that goes along with it. So we've given advisors, or I've tried to create for advisors, the most comprehensive tools that we can use. It's up to them to internalize it, though. And
Sure.
an advisor will take my stuff and they'll trim it down, they'll cut it up, they'll inject their own stories, which is exactly what you want them to do. I mean, that's 100% what they need to do, is to make this their own world. And that's what the audience buys into. But the meat is there, the mechanisms are there, and the metaphor is so rich and so powerful that any advisor can use this, and clients will immediately go, okay, yeah, I get it. You're a retirement expert. You're the person who's going to guide me now through the most difficult phase of my financial journey. And we make that case very vehemently. I mean, then when you think about it, retirement is a completely different time of life for so many reasons. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong, and there's so many things that a client needs to think about that they didn't need to think about when they were 30 or 40 or even 50 years old. Now they've got to think about it, and they need an expert that can help them think about it. That's the whole point behind this. So it's just, it really works. So can I tell you, it makes sense.
I love it. And I appreciate it. You just mentioned reference. So for those of you listening, Frank really has developed this as a complete tool, 5 or 6 page PDF, lots of explaining, lots of telling, showing details, lots of ideas about how to make it your own, even this PowerPoint bolt on that you can do at the beginning. I love that, Frank. So we are talking about a literal tool, not just an idea. If you got the idea and you want to run with it, great. But if you want to actually see the tool, I do want you to share, Frank, in just a minute how people can find that. And we'll also post it on the podcast page so people can find that as a resource that they can use. I want you just to touch on, though, before we go, Frank, where are some places that an advisor would use this analogy? Talking about at White Glove, we're doing presentations, we're doing workshops, but you've told me there are a lot of different places that an advisor might want to use this sort of analogy as well.
Any conversation with a client or a prospect, there comes a point in that conversation, particularly with prospects, most of the prospects, where you need to differentiate yourself from your competition. How are you special? How are you different from my stockbroker over at XYZ? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where this becomes very useful. Now, if I'm in a simple one-on-one conversation or a phone call, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on the Harbor Pilot analogy, but I am going to use elements of the story to say, you know what, let me explain what I do, because what I do is very different. And what I do is exactly what you need now at this time of your life. Now, not every advisor is going to be comfortable with this, quite frankly. There are many advisors out there who are very deep into the accumulation mode. They want to talk about the stock market. They want to talk about Bitcoin. They want to talk about ways to make more money. The vast majority of people today with significant money don't need that conversation anymore. They need now somebody to protect them from things that could go wrong. And that's where this becomes a very powerful add-on to any discussion, whether you're doing a seminar, whether you're on a phone call, webinar, any form like that. And you have to trim it. In a conversation, I'm not going to do a 30-minute presentation on the Harbor Pilot, but I might inject a few thoughts to say, hey, look, retirement's different. You got to think differently about retirement now. So it can be trimmed down to any length that you want it, and it's useful in any environment, I think.
That's awesome. So Frank, if people do want to reach out to you and find out more about it, and I will include these links too, but I just want you to share how they might actually reach out to you and get a hold of this resource.
Yeah, easiest is just to go to my website. It's maselligroup.com, M-A-S-E-L-L-I, maselligroup.com, or shoot me an email, frank@maselligroup.com. Contact your White Glove coaches, your White Glove people, your marketing experts there. They can tap you into any of my stuff. And we have a truckload of tools. I mean, I've created this entire mess of tools that would be very useful for you. And they're all free. I mean, that's the best part about this is I'm just giving stuff away. So it's a lot of fun.
You're amazing. We appreciate it. You got these content ideas coming out of your ears here. So we appreciate you sharing them with us. I think this is a fabulous tool and a great way for advisors who are maybe looking for a way to, reinvent, reignite, reconnect, like just some good ways to get themselves out there and really distinguish themselves from some other people that their prospects may be talking to. So I love the Harbor Pilot. Frank, before I let you go, I would love to end the podcast, as we always do with our guests, asking you about a definition of success. So this could be something for, your personal or your professional life, or something that you share with your clients when you're coaching them. I'd just love to hear something about how you define success.
That's interesting. The simplest definition I can think of success is doing something you love to do, getting really, really good at it, and then hopefully turning that into a career in some way. I have not worked a day in my life since I graduated college.
Wow.
Because everything I've done in my life, I've absolutely been passionate about. I've loved doing. And fortunately, at some point I got paid to do it. So that was very useful. You want to get compensated too. So, but doing things you love to do and being really, really good at it. And I've tried to live that model my entire life.
You have certainly helped us, and I can absolutely say you've achieved success by that standard for sure. So thank you so much, Frank. We really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, Laura. You too. Take care.
Frank, this has been fantastic. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to meet you. You've got an energy about you that, well, obviously that's why Laura brought you on the show, because this has been great.
It's fun. I love working with her.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, thank you for what you do. Thank you for this podcast and bringing this to the audience. And of course, our last thank you always goes to you, the audience. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Fast Podcast with Laura Galloway. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Laura comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at White Glove, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Fast Podcast, Financial Advisor Strategy Talks with Laura Galloway, your go-to source designed to help you grow your business. Have questions about the topics covered during the show? Visit our website at www.whiteglove.com or email us at info@whiteglove.com. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of White Glove. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial services provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.